Hello, Sarah MacArthur here once again with Project 2020, the mandate for conservative BS. Anyway, okay. Today's June 19th, which happy Juneteenth. I guess it's happy, or it's a solemn holiday because it evokes, our troublesome history, which, we're not always the best behaved country towards all of its citizens, and didn't even consider everyone citizens until the turn of the 19th century. So women didn't get the right to vote, and blacks didn't get the right to vote. And even after they got the right to vote, they weren't able to vote because their state parties and kept them from voting, and just any number of really horrible things. So today's special. It's a federal holiday, and I'm glad that we celebrate it now. It's a wonderful thing. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to get stuff done on the Facebook page. I have my book. I'm going to talk about the Department of Defense. Some things are really strange. Some things are beyond my range of knowledge. I didn't have enough time this week to be able to do that. And then On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, Yale professor. I don't want to violate any copyright laws. There we go. Chapter 3, Beware the One-Party State. And we're there. We have one party that is political and the other party that's a cult. And they follow a person and that person's desires in 2020, they actually just got rid of their platform because their platform was whatever Donald Trump wanted, which is crazy. You have a platform for people to decide if they like your policies and they want to go through with what you do. Really thirsty today. There's a lot of smoke and stuff in the air. The air quality is not so good. All right, beware the one-party state. Parties that remade states and suppressed rivals were not omnipotent from the start. They exploited a historic moment to make political life impossible for their opponents. So support the multi-party system and defend the rules of democratic elections. Vote in local and state elections while you can. Consider running for office. And that's important because there's no Democrat ran for office here in Chavez County in New Mexico on a local level. And that's very disappointing. Then we do have control of the House and Senate in our legislative body in New Mexico, and our governor and the attorney general and the auditor and our treasurer. Those are all Democrats. So we're pretty much controlled in the state by a Democratic Party. But locally here, no. And we've got about just under 9,000 registered Democrats. And in the primary, less than 1,000 voted. And I understand probably if we had people that were running for office, and running for office is county clerk, county treasurer, county assessor, county commission, city council, water rights, school boards, all those things. Those are local elections, and you need to really, it's one party down here now, and that's it. An early American proverb held that where annual elections end, tyranny begins. Will we come to see the elections of 2024 much as Russians see the elections of 1990 when they elected Putin, or Czechs the elections of 1946, or Germans the elections of 1932, because it was those elections that have then prevented them from being able to have elections at this time. This, for now, depends on us. Much needs to be done to fix the gerrymandered system so that each citizen has one equal vote, and so that each vote can be simply counted by a fellow citizen. We need paper ballots because they cannot be tampered with remotely and can always be recounted. We need to remove private funding from what should be public campaigns for office. We will have to take seriously our own Constitution, which forbids oath-breaking insurrectionists from running for office. That would include Donald Trump and all of the senators and representatives that voted against certifying the election in 2020. I mean, the very first thing that Yvette Herald did, that's the CD2 previous congressional representative before Gabe Vasquez, who's our current representative, doing a swell, wonderful job. What she did, her very first vote in Congress, was to vote against certifying the election that she actually got elected at. And how stupid is that? That's a pretty stupid woman. This sort of work can be done at the local and state levels. Any future elections will be a test of American traditions. So beware. Let's see. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, Wendell Phillips, the American abolitionist, said. And he added, the manna of popular liberty must be gathered each day, or it is rotten. And I think we can all agree that Donald Trump, twice impeached, not convicted because the Republican political party refused to live up to their oaths to the Constitution, and they didn't convict him and prevent him from being able to run for office again. And let's not forget that Mitch McConnell actually said that he was going to let the voters decide that. And the voters did decide that. And then when he got that second impeachment, he was like, well, we'll just go ahead and let the voters decide. And there's criminal cases, he said. There's criminal actions, and he'll have to deal with that. And after this, we're not going to impeach him. Well, they should have impeached him. That would have solved all these problems that we're having, and he would have gone away into history and played golf and been senile. And so for those of you who don't know or don't pay attention, you need to start watching some snippets on YouTube that, not just me, but you need to watch the kind of stuff that Rupert Murdoch with all of his things are doing. And somebody is really jonesing to get in touch with me. Okay. All right. I see. I'm getting alerts about the Ruidoso fire, and there's a flash flood emergency. It's in effect for this area until 11:15 tonight. For the Ruidoso, it's the South Fork fire, which is on the Mescalero Apache lands, and so and then it's just horrible. It's just horrible up there. And the salt fire. Oh, I'm sorry. The salt fire is the one that's on the Apache lands. Flash flood also for the salt fire until 11:15 tonight. Extremely dangerous, life-threatening situation. Do not attempt to travel there. Let us all keep them in our prayers. All the people from Ruidoso and Ruidoso Downs is now being evacuated, I understand. And so more than 7,000 people have been displaced from Ruidoso, and they say unofficially that 1,500 structures, they can't all be homes, but structures have been burnt to the ground. So that's pretty devastating for New Mexico. And our governor declared a state of emergency already for them. Okay. Lots to think about, always lots to think about. And the truth is that unless you're involved, unless you go vote, you are helping the other side. And maybe you want to vote for the other side. That's fine too. You're entitled to your vote. What you're not entitled to do is to get rid of our governing document, and that is the Constitution. Declaration of Independence created our country, and the Constitution actually is our governing body. And if you can't live by the rules and the things and the amendments within that, then you're the one with the problem. Because the truth is that all these people that go back to saying, well, let's take the original words from the Constitution and let's only make decisions at the Supreme Court level based on originalism. And the problem with that is that those founding fathers also created the first 10 amendments, and the 9th Amendment gives you the right to change items in the Constitution. So they never intended for us to only look at things from the view of 248 years ago. They intended it to grow and breathe and live as a living document as we are. And that is the brilliance of that document. I'm just disgusted that the Federalist Society, who's overtaken all these law schools and ought to be banned for being undemocratic, that those people are buying into that crap. It's just garbage. Sorry. But at least I didn't swear. Okay. Chapter 4 is the Department of Defense. Christopher Miller, who's all over Instagram acting like a fool, saying horrible, nasty things and being very racist and being ugly. He worked in the White House for Trump. And now he thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't. It says the Constitution requires the federal government to provide for the common defense, and it does say that. It assigns to Congress the authority to raise and support armies and to provide and maintain a navy, and specifies that the president is the commander-in-chief of America's armed forces. Ever since our founding, Americans have understood that the surest way to avoid war is to be prepared for peace, for it in peace. And when deterrence fails, we must fight and we must win. Don't have a problem with that. Those are American values that everyone should be behind because that's in the Constitution. Do we need to be warmongers? No, we don't. And do we need to be this huge, war beyond belief, $900 billion for Department of Defense stuff so that we can sell it? Because that is one of the things they want to do in here is to be able to sell faster and without regulation and without having to go through all the hoops. They want to sell our military weapons to other countries and not have to go through Congress. That's in here. All right. So it says the DOD is a deeply troubled institution. I have to disagree. I don't think so. The military commander, I mean, they have a chain of command, and I just don't see it as a deeply troubled institution. They say that there's wildly shifting security policies, exceedingly poor discipline and program execution, and most recently, the Biden administration's profoundly unserious equity agenda and vaccine mandates have taken their serious toll. One of the things they asked for in here in the Department of Defense is to allow, as soon as the Trump or some conservative guy takes over, and on day one, they want to be able to offer all those people that got thrown out of the Army for not getting a vaccine the ability to come back in and get back pay and to have that wiped off their record that they didn't take a vaccine. Oh, and they still don't have to take the vaccine. Let me tell you why that's ridiculous and stupid. So the military or the Army is one of the largest, I guess you could say, socialist organizations there is. There's a chain of command and you have to follow it. When I was in the Army, we got lined up, and for like 3 weeks solid, we went like once a week and got 3 or 4 shots in our arms. And then for 2 days, we're really super sore. But we were traveling and going places and going to other countries, and we have to get the vaccines that the other countries mandate. And there wasn't any, do you want the shot or don't you? It's okay if you don't want it, if you don't believe in it. If you don't believe in it and you refuse to take it, then you get thrown out of the Army for disobeying a direct order. And they gave them like a year to do it. They gave them time and said, you have to do these things. Or I don't know, everyone got a year, but certainly they got told, you've got to take this vaccine. This is for the group, the community, everyone that's in the Army. And so now this book is talking about, well, let's just let them all back in. Oh, and give them back pay for the entire time that from the time they got thrown out until when they want to come back in. And we'll just give them all of their back pay. For disobeying a direct order? I don't think so. That makes me crazy. So it says, our disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, our impossibly muddled China strategy, the growing involvement of senior military officers in the political arena, and deep confusion about the purpose of our military are clear signals of a disturbing decay and markers of a dangerous decline in our nation's capabilities and will. Okay. I have a problem with them complaining about Afghanistan. Joe Biden, his hands were tied, and the plan to get out of Afghanistan was negotiated by President Trump and his people. It wasn't negotiated by Joe Biden. Joe Biden just had to live with it. And it didn't go well, and there were American lives lost, and it was a sad, sad situation. But certainly isn't Joe Biden's entire fault that happened, because he didn't negotiate that. So the other thing is that you've got Trump, who he took some Navy SEAL guy from Texas, I think, I could be wrong, who had been convicted of clearly killing civilians. And it was his Navy SEAL buddies that turned him in, which is almost unheard of. It's like the blue line in the police department. Navy SEALs don't tell on each other, but this guy's behavior and criminal acts were so egregious that he got convicted. And what did Trump do? He pardoned him. Didn't go through the proper channels, doesn't follow procedure, just decides to, I'm just going to, do that. And now we're finding out that President Trump is actually getting paid for pardons through Roger Stone, who's also in trouble this week for basically saying, we've got judges lined up for the next time we don't win the election, and we're going to fight it. God, you guys pay attention. Pay attention. Things are really bad right now. All right. Then they throw in here some comment about illicit narcotics and how that is destroying the military. And we have killed 4 times as many people in 1 year as we lost in our 20-year war against Al-Qaeda. I'm sorry, the military is not responsible for the narcotic problem here. That would be the Sackler family from Greenwich, Connecticut, who knew that those were addictive drugs and still forced doctors and insurance companies and everyone else to push those drugs. And there's still a problem with people taking those drugs. So, okay, priority 1 within the Department of Defense: reestablish a culture of command accountability, non-politicization, and warfighting focus. Priority number 2, transform our armed forces for maximum effectiveness in an era of great power competition. I don't have a problem with that one. Number 3, provide necessary support to Department of Homeland Security border protection operations. Border protection is a national security issue that requires sustained attention and effort by all elements of the executive branch. No, that's the Coast Guard undersea, and that would be Homeland Security and Border Patrol that does that, not the military. The military is for our common defense, and we are not being inundated with people with rifles and guns and knives at the border. We're being inundated with people that are searching for a better way of life to come over here and not be starving or bribed into working in drug factories because they're going to kill their family if they don't, that kind of stuff. So people are coming over here because there's a better life, and it should take people. It's just a shame that our immigration policy takes so long to allow people to come over here legally, and thousands of dollars. And then they get ripped off, and there's nothing they can do because they're not a citizen. And so many horrible stories. I had a conversation with another chair recently, and she was saying that it takes 17 years on average for people to actually become legal and come over here. And that is absolutely not okay. And that is Congress's fault, both sides of the aisle, and not wanting to pass legislation that is meaningful and that will actually create a path for people to come over here and work for our employers. Why are our employers not in trouble for doing what they do? Why are they not the people that get fined for hiring illegals? If you don't want illegals here, then figure out a way to get people that want to come over here and work and pay into our economy and invest in us. Then the problem is we don't have a Congress that is willing to actually accomplish anything or do anything. And that is a problem, and it needs to stop. Okay. Priority number 4 is to demand financial transparency and accountability. They say those things, but then they go into all these details about how we don't really want that. We don't want to follow the rules. We don't want to follow the actual regulations. We'd like to bypass some of that. So even though those are their priorities in the Department of Defense, when you read the actual chapter, it's like, oh, wait, that's not actually transparent. That's being secretive. That's just bypassing Congress. That's just, these are really crazy things they're talking about here. All right. The other thing I'm going to say about the Homeland Security is they're focused on the Mexican border. There are people coming on the northern border from Canada, but more importantly, there are hundreds of thousands of people that come in here on tourist visas and disappear. But we know where some of them are. There's a lot of Russians that live in Miami, and there's a lot of Russians that live in West Palm Beach in Trump-owned buildings. And they came over here with no intention of leaving. And they came over on a visa. And suddenly they've got lawyers and they're able to, purchase their way into the country and then get a legalized thing. Like Melania Trump, she got a genius visa. Those are supposed to be reserved for people that are like nuclear physicists or chemical engineers, or they've won a Nobel Prize for their stuff. But she was just a really swell model. It's not a genius visa. Sorry, I will not buy that one at all. All right, so DOD policy. They are going hard and heavy on China. They admit that we face real threats from Russia, as evidenced by his brutal war in Ukraine. That's good, as well as from Iran, North Korea, which today was a bad day for. We had a personal big bear hug with Putin and the leader of North Korea, because I can't pronounce his name. And they think that our Defense Department is ineffective. It's a grim landscape, is what they say. All right. The focus and priority for U.S. defense activities will deny China the first island chain. Okay, so we do want to protect Taiwan. That is something that they want to do, and that's a good thing. They want to increase allied conventional defense burden sharing. Let me read that again to you. Do you understand what that means? Increase allied conventional defense burden sharing. U.S. allies must take far greater responsibility for their conventional defense. U.S. allies must play their part not only in dealing with China, but also in dealing with threats from Russia, Iran, and North Korea. NATO. And they are, but apparently the conservatives don't feel like we should bear any financial burden. They should bear more financial burden. But they don't realize that those people are on the same landmass, and they do bear a different kind of a burden, whether it's financial or not. So make burden sharing a central part of U.S. defense strategy with the United States, not just helping allies to step up, but strongly encouraging them to do so. Sounds like blackmail. Support greater spending and collaboration by Taiwan and allies of the Asian Pacific, like Japan and Australia, to create a collective defense model. Transform NATO so that U.S. allies are capable of fielding the great majority of the conventional forces required to deter Russia, while relying on the United States primarily for our nuclear deterrent, and select other capabilities while reducing the U.S. force posture in Europe. They're going to close bases in Europe. That's what that meant. And we're just gonna tell you that we're going to bomb you with a nuclear bomb. And that'll be our help. That'll be our contribution to your defense in NATO. In other words, we're not going to participate with NATO anymore. That's their plan. They want to sustain support for Israel, even as America empowers Gulf partners to take responsibility for their own coastal, air, and missile defenses, both individually and working collectively. Enable South Korea to take the lead in its conventional defense against North Korea. In other words, we're going to vacate South Korea and let you deal with it on your own. That's what they're saying. Implement nuclear modernization and expansion. And I don't actually have a problem with that. If we're going to have nuclear weapons, maybe we shouldn't use the oldest computer that uses floppy disks in order to control those nuclear weapons, because that's an issue. Maybe it's not a well-known issue, but it is an issue. We haven't spent any kind of infrastructure money on being able to upgrade their computer systems that control whether or not a nuclear missile actually leaves the silo, wherever it is, and goes where it's supposed to go. So, that might be something that we want to spend a little money on. And we have the capability. We do. We have some of the best and brightest minds in the world that are capable of designing those computer systems that will be more effective, and including computer systems that can run when the grid goes down. That's a thought. They want to expand and modernize the U.S. nuclear force so that it has the size, sophistication, and tailoring to deter China and Russia simultaneously. We have more nuclear weapons than anyone else. I don't know what else you need. You're not deterring them now. Russia's invaded Ukraine, and they did the Crimea, back in 2018 or something. This is ridiculous. Increase allied counter-terrorist burden sharing. Transnational terrorism remains a threat to Americans, even as we pivot towards Asia. Sustain the military forces needed to deter, prevent, and combat terrorism, but at a sustainable cost in concert with the other elements of national power and partners' efforts. Just some really crazy stuff going on here. President should suddenly review the recommendations of the congressionally mandated Commission on Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution Reform. Develop a strategy for implementing those that the administration considers to be in the best interest of the American people. Okay. Require the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, and all service secretaries to conduct a night court and use existing authorities to terminate outdated and underperforming programs so that money can be used for what works and will work. Require the undersecretaries and service secretaries to brief the secretary annually on the results. They want to shrink what they want to shrink and don't want to pay for, and they want to contract and have faster, more streamlined contracts to be able to get things that they would rather have. Strengthen the ability of acquisitions to engage in multi-year procurements and block buys. Optimize the DoD acquisition community. And it says senior acquisition leaders should design a system that allows decision makers to stay within the law, but bypass unnecessary departmental regulations. Regulations are laws that are not in the best interest of the government and hamper acquisition of capabilities that warfighters require. In other words, well, we want to stay within the law, but we don't really want to follow those regulations. How's that working? Okay. Let's talk about foreign military sales, and they have to regain the role as the arsenal of democracy. I was stunned when I read that. It says that our government foreign military sales nosedived to a low of $34.8 billion in 2021 from a record high of $55.7 billion in 2018. So apparently they didn't feel like they sold enough beans and bullets. End informal congressional notification. Sounds horrible. It says the tiered review process is not codified in law. It is merely a practice in which the Department of State provides a preview of prospective arm transfers before Congress is formally notified. And the tiered review process to eliminate at least 20 days from the FMS process, which is the foreign military sales. Okay. Use the tiered review process only when unanimous congressional support is guaranteed in order to eliminate the weaponization by select members of Congress. I'm sorry, who are the select members of Congress that are blocking everything right now? Oh, would that be the promotions? That was Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, and he blocked that for over 9 months. Didn't promote a single person in the military because that one guy wanted you to. Hey, I'm sorry, Harry, I am talking right now. You just wait a minute. Anyway, just know that these are bad things. They want to minimize barriers to collaboration. The high cost of developing defense platforms requires the United States to collaborate with our key allies to minimize waste, which sounds good. To create a system that's greater than that of the United States alone. So they want to minimize the barriers for our allies and others and get them streamlined to be able to purchase weapons. Sounds great. Decrease international traffic in arms regulations to facilitate trade with such allies as the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. So, okay, so I already mentioned, I wrote myself a note to talk about Tuberville, and I already mentioned it, but that DoD personnel, the men and women of America's armed forces, is the most critical component of our national defense strategy, but they have been overextended, undervalued, and insufficiently resourced. Thanks, Tommy Tuberville. That was you. And you caused, I think it was the Secretary of the Army, who was doing 3 different jobs, to have a heart attack because you refused to promote them, because you wanted nobody to be able to use military funding in order to travel outside or relocate in order to get an abortion, which is totally unrelated to national security. You're really hip on national security, Tommy Tuberville. So here are some needed reforms on our recruiting and retention for the Department of Defense. Recruiting has been the worst in 2022 that it has been in 2 generations. Probably not going to argue with that. The recruiting problem is not service specific. It affects the entire joint force. That's all the services combined. They want a special assistant to the president appointed who will maintain liaison with Congress and the DoD and all other interested parties on the issue of recruiting and retention. So they're going to create another job. Improve recruiting by suspending the use of recently introduced MHS Genesis system. That is the military health services system that uses private medical records of potential recruits at military entrance processing stations. We don't want to know what drugs you're taking. We just want to be able to recruit you. We don't want to know if you have only 1 kidney. We don't want to know any of that because it slows down us being able to recruit you. They have already changed the face of that, and they have created this issue where basically you don't even have to have a high school diploma, and they've changed the law on tattoos so that there are certain places you can't still have them, but for the most part you can be completely tattooed, I guess, and still make it into the service, where in the past you were not allowed to have that happen. Okay. Improve military recruiters' access to secondary schools and require completion of the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, the ASVAB, the military entrance examination, listen to me, by all students in schools that received federal funding. It used to be, if you wanted to take the ASVAB, you would arrange and make sure that happened. But now they're going after your high school students. And all high school students, I presume all high school students that receive federal funding, and that would include all those church schools and those religious schools that now get vouchers. That's federal funding. So your kids are going too. They want to reinstitute the draft. I haven't been able to actually find that in writing, but that is what other people are saying online, that they are going to put the draft in. And if you're making every high school student take the ASVAB, that's the military entrance examination to see where your aptitude is, where you might be the best suited, then you are planning on instituting a draft. So they want to encourage members of Congress to provide time to military recruiters during each town hall session in their congressional district. So now your recruiter gets to stand up and make a plea for your kid. Increase the number of junior ROTC programs in secondary schools. There aren't enough of them, so they want more. Restore standards of lethality and excellence. Entrance criteria for military service and specific occupation careers should be based on the needs of those positions. Exceptions for individuals who are already predisposed to require medical treatment, for example, HIV positive or suffering from gender dysphoria, we want to discriminate, should be removed, and those with gender dysphoria should be expelled from the military service. In other words, if you think you're a girl, but you're really born a boy, you're out. Physical fitness requirements should be based on the occupational field without consideration of gender, race, ethnicity, or orientation. In other words, they are going to remove the standards based on what your job is for you to be physically fit. So the standard of the 2-minute mile and age and race, and now I never did consider race. It was age and gender that they considered. But they're talking about, let's just base it on the job they do. So they don't really need to be physically fit in order to be in the military. So we can up our military. We can, have higher gains in recruitment. Here's the one that says, okay, so eliminate politicization and reestablish trust and accountability and restore faith to the force. In 2021, the Reagan National Defense Survey found that only 45% of Americans have a great deal of trust and confidence in the military. And they had, in 2018, they had 70%. Well, in 2001, when they took that test, what can they have been thinking of the year before? Let's see, when was January 6th? Oh, it was 2021. And prior to that, who was in office? President Trump. And his view of the military is pretty crappy. So, just saying. So here it is. Reinstate service members to active duty who were discharged for not receiving the COVID vaccine. Restore their appropriate rank and provide back pay. Eliminate Marxist indoctrination and divisive critical race theory programs and abolish newly established diversity, equity, inclusion offices and staff. Restrict the use of social media solely for purposes of recruitment and discipline any armed services personnel who use an official command channel to engage with civilian critics on social media. Audit the course offerings at military academies to remove Marxist indoctrination. Eliminate tenure for academic professionals. Hey, are y'all here in West Point and Annapolis and the Air Force Academy? Are you listening to this? They want to eliminate tenure for you as a professor and apply the same rules to instructors that are applied to other DoD contracting personnel. Reverse policies that allow transgender individuals to serve in the military. Gender dysphoria is incompatible with the demands of military service, and the use of public monies for transgender surgeries or to facilitate abortion for service members should be ended. Audit all, it says the value of the military family, and it talks about supporting them and giving them better housing, that kind of stuff, expanding childcare. Those are great things. Then they say audit all curricula and health policies in DoD schools, Department of Defense schools. That's on base. For military families, remove all inappropriate materials and reverse all the inappropriate materials, which they apparently have just gone over. Reduce the number of generals. Rank creep is pervasive. The next president should limit the continued advancement of many of the existing cadre, many of whom have been advanced by prior administrations for reasons other than their warfighting prowess. There is more. Eliminate peripheral intelligence obligations that do not advance military readiness. Expand the integration of intelligence activities. Restore accountability and public trust to the intelligence community. It wants to rebuild the Army, increase the Army force structure by 50,000 to handle 2 major regional contingencies simultaneously. Stop using the Army as a test bed for social evolution. Misusing the Army in this way distracts from its core purpose while doing little to reshape the American social structure. The Army no longer reflects national demographics to the degree that it did in 1974 when the draft was eliminated. There's your comment about the draft. So we'll open the draft and everybody will be in the military. And I don't necessarily, we are not supposed to draft people. It's my understanding, I could be completely off base here, but it was my understanding that the draft was only when we were in a time of war, when Congress declared that we were at war. Just saying. There is more in here, and I will save that for a rainy day, another Wednesday. I may have to start doing these more than once, but there's more in there, and I'm at 40 minutes, so I apologize. What else is important right now that I can think of? Have you watched Donald Trump lately? Have you watched the things he's talking about? Are they related to policy? Are they related to helping Americans? Or are they just about how he's been a victim and he's just absolutely self-centered and megalomaniac and narcissistic and only interested in saving his ass from going to jail. And remember that he is the one that chose to run for office to avoid jail. When people are criminals, they're criminals. So thanks. Hit like, subscribe, and I will talk to you next Wednesday. Thank you. Bye. Hi.